the intermittent non-carbon tax. So that's pretty key. But we're going to go over a great TED Talk on the subject now.
I have a 2-year-old daughter named Naya, who's under the mistaken impression that this conference is named in honor of her father. Who am I to contradict my baby girl? As many of you know, there's something about becoming a parent that concentrates the mind on long-term problems like climate change. It was the birth of my daughter that inspired me to launch this climate organization in order to counteract the excessive polarization of this issue in the United States and to find a conservative pathway forward. Yes, folks, a Republican climate solution is possible. And you know what? It may even be better. Let me try to prove that to you. What we really need is a killer app to climate policy. In the technology world, a killer app is an application so transformative that it creates its own market, like Uber. In the climate world, a killer app is a new solution so promising that it can break through the seemingly insurmountable barriers to progress. These include the psychological barrier. Climate advocates have long been encouraging their fellow citizens to make short-term sacrifices now for benefits that accrue to other people in other countries 30 or 40 years in the future. It just doesn't fly because it runs contrary to basic human nature. Next is the geopolitical barrier. Under the current rules of global trade, countries have a strong incentive to free ride off the emissions reductions of other nations instead of strengthening their own programs. This has been the curse of every international climate negotiations, including Paris. Finally, we have the partisan barrier. Even the most committed countries, Germany, the United Kingdom, Canada, are nowhere near reducing emissions at the required scale and speed. Not even close. And the partisan climate divide is far more acute here in the United States. We are fundamentally stuck, and that is why we need a killer app of climate policy to break through each of these barriers. I'm convinced that the road to climate progress in the United States runs through the Republican Party and the business community. So in launching the Climate Leadership Council, I started by reaching out to a who's who of Republican elder statesmen and business leaders, including James Baker and George Shultz, the two most respected Republican elder statesmen in America. Martin Feldstein and Greg Mankiw, the two most respected conservative economists in the country. And Henry Paulson and Rob Walton, two of the most successful and admired business leaders. Together, we co-authored The Conservative Case for Carbon Dividends. This represents the first time that Republican leaders put forth a concrete, market-based climate solution. Thank you. We presented our plan at the White House 2 weeks after President Trump moved in. Almost every leading editorial board in the country has since endorsed our plan. And Fortune 100 companies from a wide range of industries are now getting behind it. So by now you're probably wondering, what exactly is this plan? Well, our carbon dividend solution is based on 4 pillars. The first is a gradually rising carbon tax. Although capitalism is a wonderful system, like many operating systems, it's prone to bugs, which in this case are called market failures. By far the largest is that market prices fail to take social and environmental costs into account. That means that every market transaction is based on incorrect information. And this fundamental bug of capitalism, more than any other single factor, is to blame for a climate predicament. Now, in theory, this should be an easy problem to fix. Economists agree the best solution is to put a price on the carbon content of fossil fuels, otherwise known as a carbon tax. This would discourage carbon emissions in every single economic transaction every day of by itself has proven to be unpopular and a political dead end. The answer is to return all the money raised directly to citizens in the form of equal monthly dividends. This would transform an unpopular carbon tax into a popular and populist solution, and it would also solve the underlying psychological barrier that we discussed by giving everyone a concrete benefit in the here and now. And these benefits would be significant. Assuming a carbon tax rate that starts at $40 per ton, a family of four would receive $2,000 per year from the get-go. According to the U.S. Treasury Department, the bottom 70% of Americans would receive more in dividends than they would pay in increased energy prices. That means that 223 million Americans would win economically from solving climate change. And that is revolutionary and could fundamentally alter climate politics. But there's another revolutionary element here. The amount of the dividend would grow as the carbon tax rate increases. The more we protect our climate, the more our citizens benefit. This creates a positive feedback loop, which is crucial because the only way we will reach our long-term emission reduction goals is if the carbon tax rate goes up every year. The third pillar of our program is eliminating regulations that are no longer needed once the carbon dividends plan is enacted. This is a key selling point to Republicans and business leaders. So why should we trade climate regulations for a price on carbon? Well, let me show you. Our plan would achieve nearly twice the emissions reductions of all Obama-era climate regulations combined, and nearly 3 times the new baseline after President Trump repeals all of those regulations. That assumes a carbon tax starting at $40 per ton, which translates into roughly an extra 36 cents per gallon of gas. Our plan by itself would meet the high end of America's commitment under the Paris Climate Agreement. And as you can see, the emissions reductions would continue over time. This illustrates the power of a conservative climate solution based on free markets and limited government. We would end up with less regulation and far less pollution at the same time while helping working class Americans get ahead. Doesn't that sound like something we could all support? The fourth and final pillar of our program is a new climate domino effect based on border carbon adjustments. Now that may sound complicated, but it too is revolutionary because it provides us a whole new strategy to reach a global price on carbon, which is ultimately what we need. Let me show you an example. Suppose that country A adopts a carbon dividends plan and country B does not. Well, to level the playing field and protect the competitiveness of its industries, country A would tax imports from country B based on their carbon content. Fair enough. But here's where it gets really interesting, because the money raised at the border would increase the dividends going to the citizens of country A. Well, how long do you think it would take the public in country B to realize that money should be going to them and to push for a carbon dividends plan in their own land? Add a few more countries and we get a new climate domino effect. Once one major country or region adopts carbon dividends with border or carbon adjustments, other countries are compelled to follow suit. One by one, the dominoes fall. And this domino effect can start anywhere. My preference, strongly, is the United States. But it could also start in the United Kingdom, in Germany or another European country, or even in China. Let's take China as an example. China is committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. But what its leaders care even more about is transitioning their economy to consumer-led economic development. Well, nothing could do more to hasten that transition than giving every Chinese citizen a monthly dividend. In fact, this is the only policy solution that would enable China to meet its environmental and economic goals at the same time. That's why this is the killer app of climate policy, because it would enable us to overcome each of the barriers we discussed earlier, the psychological barrier, the partisan barrier, and as we've just seen, the geopolitical barrier. All we need is a country to lead the way. And one method of finding what you're looking for is to take out an ad. So let's read this one together. Wanted, country to pioneer carbon dividends plan. Cost to country, 0. Starting date, as soon as possible. Advantages, most effective climate solution. Popular and populist, pro-growth and pro-business. Shrinks government and helps the working class. Additional compensation, gratitude of current and future generations, including my daughter. Thank you.
I'm not sure I've seen a Conservative get a standing O. That's pretty cool. So, I mean, the logic seems pretty powerful, but some people you talk to in politics say, you know, it's hard to imagine us still getting through Congress. How are you feeling about momentum behind this?
So I understand that many are very pessimistic about what's happening in the United States with President Trump. I'm less pessimistic. Here's why. The actions of this White House, the early actions on climate, are just the first move in a complex game of climate chess. So far, it's been a repeal-only strategy. The pressure is going to mount for a replacement program, which is where we come in. And there are 3 reasons why, which I'll go through real quickly. One, the business community is fundamentally parting ways with the White House on climate change. In fact, we're finding a number of Fortune 100 companies supporting our program. Within 2 months, we're going to be announcing some really surprising names coming out in favor of this program. 2, there is no issue in American politics where there's a more fundamental gap between the Republican base and the Republican leadership than climate change. And 3, thinking of this analogy of chess, the big decision up ahead is, does the administration stay in Paris? Well, let's count it out both ways. If it stays in Paris, as many are pushing for in the administration, well, then that begs the question, what's the plan? We have the plan. But if they don't stay in Paris, the international pressure will be overwhelming. Our Secretary of State will be asking other countries for native contributions, and they'll be saying, no, give us our Paris commitment. Come through on your commitment, we'll come through on ours. So international, business, and even the Republican base will all be calling for a Republican replacement plan, and hopefully we've provided one.
Thanks so much, Ted. Thank you,
Chris.
Great, so that's a little TED talk on the concept of a carbon fee and dividend. We'll definitely have a question and answer period about that. But really quick, we wanted to have our liaison, Ron, go over just kind of an idea of what CCL, how CCL supports that concept.
Sure. Let's see, where should I go up there? Okay.
And let me know if there's any slides that you want me to bring up when we talk here.
So let me just, while I'm getting up there, say that Citizens Climate Lobby is proposing a carbon fee and dividend. However, Citizens Climate Lobby is very non-partisan. That talk was from a Republican businessman, and if that offended anybody here who thinks maybe corporate business excesses is part of the problem, I could understand that, you know. However, Citizens Climate Lobby believes that the road to a successful carbon fee and dividend proposal requires bipartisanship. right? They don't believe that the best road forward is to have a huge 2018 landslide towards the Democratic Party that will then pass this. Citizens Climate Lobby believes it will be more effective if it can be bipartisan, and that this climate fee and dividend is introduced into the Congress by a Republican. Okay, practical politics. That's all that is. So maybe I can have a shot at. I'm not going to do it as well as this guy did, Ted Halstead. He's a great speaker, but I'll try. Carbon fee and dividend. Firstly, the carbon part. This is carbon dioxide released by the burning of fossil fuels. Okay, and other greenhouse gases will also be considered, and they will be converted to an equivalent amount of carbon dioxide. Where is that fee going to be collected? Okay, it's going to be collected at the coal mine, the oil well, the gas fracking well, or at the port of entry if it's imported into the United States. And the fee will be different from this proposal, from this gentleman's group. It won't be $40 a ton, it'll be $15 a ton. But it will escalate every year, as he said his will, and it will escalate every year by $10 per ton per year. So in year 2 after the passage of the legislation, it'll be 15 plus 10, $25. Year 3, $35, and so on and so forth. Okay. Where is that money going to come from, and who collects it? Well, answer that question, it's the accountants. The accountants at the coal mine and at BP and Texaco and all the other oil wells and the gas fracking and the ports of entry, they know exactly how much they produce, how much they sell. So at the end of the reporting period, maybe it's weekly, monthly, whatever, they're going to say, well, gosh darn, we dug out X number of tons of coal, Wyoming, we put it on the railroad trucks and they went miles long, beautiful big trains. You see them rolling across Wyoming if you've been there. It's kind of spectacular and scary. But anyway, based on that amount of coal that we dug out, this amount of carbon dioxide will be produced. And we're going to take that figure, we're going to multiply it by $15. I'm going to send a check to the U.S. Treasury. U.S. Treasury is going to put it in a special fund. It's called the Carbon Fee Trust Fund. Okay. That money won't go anywhere else. It will stay in that fund, and then at the end of the month, it'll be returned to individuals and families across the United States on an equal dollar basis. And that's what I guess Zoe had put up, the citizenclimatelobby.org calculator. You can go in there, I guess, and punch in some numbers relative to your personal situation, and it will tell you how much you're going to get per month. This may sound pie in the sky, but let me tell you, as a Social Security recipient, I get a check from the U.S. Treasury every month, and it's real, and I love it. If I was in Alaska, I'd get a check from the state of Alaska every year, I believe it is, based on oil revenues that are produced in the state of Alaska. And those folks love it too. So Ted Halstead's comment that this dividend is going to be popular, I gotta say, is right on. You know, everybody's going to love it. From the point of view of politics, if you are in favor of smaller government, this whole process here is what has been called revenue neutral, which means government's pulling in all this money from the coal mine, the oil well, and the port of entry, but they're sending 100% of it back out to US individuals and households. So it's revenue neutral, it's not bloating government coffers. That's a good point in its favor. What will happen? People are going to pay a little more for gas when you fill up at the pump. You're going to pay a little more for electricity because Halco burns fossil fuels to produce the electricity that runs our stuff. You're going to pay a little more for imported carbon-intensive goods. One of the things that I like to dream up is bananas, KTA. Look at the label, from Ecuador. Not from Hamakua, from Ecuador. How much aviation fuel did that, I don't know even really where Ecuador is, but I think it's a long way from here, right? And it came in a plane. So, carbon-intensive goods. So, the dividend, however, that you will get will more than compensate you for the increase in those costs. Unless you're very well off and you're in the upper income brackets. And as I've said in the past, for the billionaires among us, it ain't going to matter, folks. It's going to be decimal dust. And the reason for that is if you're very rich, you can afford to buy a lot of stuff. And your carbon footprint is quite high. So you will be actually paying quite a lot of money out in the carbon fee because you're doing all that. And the dividend is relatively small compared to what you will pay. But if you're homeless, if you're under the bridge at Wailoa, you can't afford to buy a lot of stuff. You are what has been called carbon virtuous. Maybe that's not by choice, but you don't buy a lot of stuff. And therefore, when you get that check, you are going to be ahead on what you spend, right? And an example would be a mom, single mom, couple of kids, got medical health issues, and is trying to pay the rent. She's juggling rent, she's juggling expensive healthcare meds, and she's juggling food. And she doesn't have enough money to cover those three things. And something goes by the way. Is it her health? Is it the rent? Does she end up living in a car? And is that the reality that we're facing? So this dividend will be a very positive thing for the lower economic people among us. So, the magic of the proposal is 3 bullet points here. The gradually increasing cost of fossil fuels, when combined with the decreasing costs of renewables, solar panels costs coming down, battery storage costs coming down, electric cars costs coming down, that will shift the market in favor of renewable energy and not fossil fuel consumption. We've mentioned lower income levels benefit disproportionately, and we also mentioned that dividends across the board will be popular more or less universally. And I might mention here, when, as Ted Halstead mentioned, President Obama, President Trump. Obama put in a whole bunch of executive orders, right? Well, you might agree with all of that. Maybe they were great. Citizens Climate Lobby isn't going to go there. We're not going to get political about it. But the next president comes in, and he's got the same executive power, and he reverses those down executive orders. So it's a flip-flop every 4 years, or 8 years at most. It's a flip-flop arrangement. If you can get something passed through Congress particularly with bipartisan support, and it becomes enshrined in the law of the land. The president can't just unilaterally say, oh, I'm not going to agree with that legislation. He can't do that. He can maybe tweak around the edge with rules and executive orders, but the fundamental legislation is stronger than presidential executive orders. And then there's the other thing about border adjustment. And the border adjustment, I think Ted Halstead explained it pretty well. If you are going to export a carbon-intensive good, maybe it's aluminum ladders. Aluminum uses a lot of electricity to refine, and you make that aluminum ladder and you want to sell it to China. Well, you'll get a credit for the amount of fossil fuel that you paid to produce that good. If it's the other way around, if we're importing aluminum ladders from China and they don't have a carbon tax, that fee will be assessed on that good as it comes into the port, and there'll be what he called a level playing field. In other words, American goods won't be made more expensive overseas because of the carbon fee. Incoming goods from countries that don't have a carbon fee will be made more expensive. So the Ecuadorian bananas are going to get a little more expensive every year, and maybe we can buy Hamakua bananas which are better and cheaper and better for the environment. So that's my pitch. Thank you for your attention.
So it's kind of like leveling the playing field so we can purchase more with our conscience and not be the cheaper thing, if that makes sense. So for a lot of industries, it is a thing where they like this, like he was explaining, because it allows them to make the virtuous choice while still being competitive. So a lot of big industries are actually into this because they're like, sweet, my competitors won't win if I show morals, you know? And also, I know, I caught a couple of people when I was calling around and inviting people, asking about what the administrative costs would be. I finally found the exact numbers on that. So administrative costs for the first year, and this is the Treasury, so it's a mechanism that already exists, so it's going to be very low cost. But the first year, it will be 7.5% of the revenues will be administrative costs. But then the second year, it will decrease to 4.6. And the fifth year, it will be 2.1. And then by the 10th year, it will be down to 1.1% of administrative costs, because the mechanism's already set up to have carbon fee and dividend, pretty much. It would just be first couple of years adjustment phase. So anyways, that was a concern I heard a lot. So but anyways, we want to know about you, and what brought you guys here tonight? Why are you interested in this topic? Why are you concerned about climate? So we're going to go around. So if we want to like say our names and what brought us here. Would you like to start?
No, because I'm finishing my notes.
Okay, cool. I like that. How about let's start in the back and go to the front? So how about the family back there?
Yep, let's start. I'm Joanna. This is my daughter Violet and my husband Bodie. And I'm getting my graduate degree here at UH Hilo. And I'm interested in agriculture, and especially what interests me about agriculture is that we can do it in a climate smart way and put a lot of carbon back in the soil, which is very ready to accept more carbon. So that's what I'm studying, and I'm interested in agriculture, and that's really how I found out about this meeting. And do you want to?
Yeah, hi, my name's Bodie. I already said that. Anyways, since about 95, I adopted being a servant to my global ecosystem as my main drive in life, and so that's pretty much why I'm here. And so,
Servant to ecosystems. Great.
Hi, I'm JJ. I've been interested in the impact of what happens to the environment for 40, 50 years now. And I think I recently have gotten the urge to get more involved in some kind of a solution to it, more than just my own kind of, well, what we call psychological things. I do things very frugally. I personally do things on a very low impact way, but I know that's not popular with a lot of people, especially my friends when I tell them. So I think that this might be a good way of approaching it. And so I think that's, and I've seen the talk before, I've been to the website, so I'm familiar with it, and I think this might be a good way forward.
Awesome. Cool.
Mike Kane, I met one of you guys at a plug-in vehicle event here last year, and that's an area I've been very involved in for a long time. So I got a call from somebody mentioning that you were going to do this, so I thought I'd stop by and see what was up.
Do you have an electric car? Is that what you're saying?
Not yet. We just moved here. We had 3 in California. We sold them all last year and moved here, and we just bought a house, so we're looking at getting it set up and getting plugged in again.
I'm Ann Gleason, and I teach here, but I've never taught in this room, so I don't know about that. Gosh, I guess I'm going to be kind of an echo of what's been said before, except I'm not involved in agriculture, but I've been worried about the climate, about the environment for the past 40 or 50 years, and I'm always conscious of trying to reduce my own carbon footprint and very frustrated because I have an SUV, things like that. And I also feel, especially now, I feel the urgency of these, the things that Obama accomplished with his executive orders and the past administration being rolled back, and it makes me feel so helpless that even if I reduce my own carbon footprint, it's not enough, so I'm going to get involved.
My name is Fred Pollock. I live in La Jolla. I'm a lychee grower. But my career for more than 20 years, I was an environment and natural resource officer for the U.S. Agency for International Development, which is the foreign assistance arm of the State Department. And I've worked in the Middle East, South Asia, Southeast Asia, on environmental issues. In the Middle East, I was working mainly on water issues. In South Asia, I worked in Nepal for, I don't know, probably 8 years on community forestry, which was reasonably successful because the trees in the hills of Nepal don't have major commercial value. And then I spent 10 years in Indonesia working on forestry and illegal logging, and those trees do have incredible commercial value, and which made any kind of success in mitigating illegal logging pretty much zero. I mean, the office towers and the hotels of Jakarta and Surabaya, I mean, they were built using, stolen money from the forest. And that situation is just a major disaster right now. And so much of the hardwoods of the world, whether it's in the Amazon or in Asia, I mean, they are under tremendous stress. And after that career, I pretty much decided that, and looking at the whole issue of climate change and environmental degradation, I think that if we don't do something, if we don't start doing something soon, I mean, we're not going to make it on this planet. And this plan here. Just one question before before I finish. What is the date on that TED Talk that we just watched? Does anybody know?
Yeah, it was after the Trump election, but it was before the withdrawal from Paris. So what are we talking? Early
First half of last year, yeah.
2017.
Yeah.
Anyway, I like this plan. I think it looks pretty good. Now one thing, I spent a lot of time dealing with politics, political situations versus the environment in my job, and I can tell you that even if you don't want to be involved in politics, you will be. Just count on that, because and with this administration, what we're talking about, we've got major constraints. I mean, we have a president, and we have the administrator of the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, who are literally climate deniers,
Right.
and who literally believe that fossil fuels aren't necessarily neutral, but they're good for us. They like the idea of fossil fuels, partly because their constituents' jobs depend on fossil fuels. But we have to find a way through this. There may be many paths, and they're all going to be rocky. But we don't have a choice. I mean, we have to start moving on this thing. I mean, nothing's really happening right now in this country, but we have to go. So this looks like a possibility.
Thank you.
My name's Marie Ellsworth. I'm a public high school English teacher across the street, YK High School. I'm on sabbatical this year, otherwise I would be grading papers right now. And I do like opening my students' eyes. I feel like they have the creative solutions that we haven't thought of yet, and we'll all be dead and they'll be running the world, so we need to leave them as good a situation as possible. They're giving me a really horrible canned curriculum that's got a unit on climate change in it that is trying to be balanced by putting the climate deniers version right into the curriculum as a possible, like a thing to choose from, which kind of upsets me. So I just kind of like switch over that page. And I just think that, as much as I can open my kids' eyes, the more solutions will come from the next generations. So I'm here to get as much information, not to tell them what to do, but to open their minds.
Thank you. Cameraman?
My name is Donald Whistles. I'm here. I like doing the video for these kind of political, get the information out there. Yeah, I've been a climate interested in evolution, but environmentalism for a long time. I remember the first Earth Day, and I have a stream sitting there, and it was like this orange crap coming down right past my house back in the day. Now I recently figured what it was Kodak. That orange stuff was the orange film waste coming past my house. So that's kind of, I started realizing that, back then. And so it's been like 40, 50 years now, and it seems like we're going further and further down the wrong path. And that's my story.
Since you're taking notes on kind of things that are on our minds and stuff, one thing that's on my mind really making me mad already is plastic packaging and food. I mean, I've been spending really good money on the healthiest, most organic food I possibly can, and yet it still comes in plastic.
I feel you.
And it's driving me up. There's no place to go to get some food without plastic unless you go to the farmer's market, but you can't buy everything you're going to eat there.
So imagine if that would cost more because it's more carbon intensive. That would be really nice because that would give the companies an incentive to decrease these things. So yeah, that's a really great thing to bring up because it's definitely a concern, and it seems like a carbon fee and dividend would help with that. So these are all really, really great reasons to have brought here today, and it really captures the full scope of concerns, which is really awesome. Would you guys want to share any, or do you feel?
I just wanted to make a comment about something that someone talked about, and that is the political solution. There is a caucus right now, Climate Solution Caucus, and in order to join, you have to find a partner of the opposite party. So it's half and half. And they have
72.
They have 72, but they have put in some legislation. I don't know whether they've actually put in the legislation we're talking about. But they promoted and they've talked in the House about the situation. So it's, and this was, what was this, about 50 when we started?
I was about to make that comment, but I didn't want to, because I couldn't remember exactly what number, but when it's like, it's grown. The faster, that's the whole thing with CCL. I've noticed the more people we get on the caucus, the more people we get in CCL, the faster it grows. It just keeps on exponentially building up pace, because it used to not go this fast, and now it's like, I think there was a week where we had like one, and then the next week we had another group join.
Yeah, I was printing these out every day.
Oh wait, got it.
Does anybody know how long has that caucus been around?
It's been around a while. I can bring up their homepage. That's actually kind of fun to look at.
I find it interesting that it's still exactly even, because what happens when, are you permanently linked to the other legislators? So if they lose their election, you're out, unless you find somebody else.
You find someone else, I assume.
Yeah, because it wouldn't be even otherwise anymore.
I think it was formed in early 2016.
So there's only been one election cycle.
Right, and the ground rule was, the Republican and the Democrat that formed it said, the ground rules are you've got to come in pairs. And that way we guarantee a 50-50. And the ground rules are you've got to believe that climate change is, global warming and the associated climate change is real, and that it's based on fossil fuel, and that it's based on human activity. Now, beyond that, you may not have to agree on a whole lot, but if you agree on those things, and as Carol mentioned, with that many people and a big block of Republicans and a big block of Democrats, now with 72 people, you've got a swing vote here. And so you might remember what's the name? The Department of Defense Authorization Spending Bill for the study of threats to the United States globally. Okay, that was coming up to be passed, the funding for it. And there was an amendment that was introduced that said, well, we agree with funding this program, but we don't want to have any mention of global warming or climate change. That needs to be totally off the table. There will be no study of that in the funding that we give to the Department of Defense. That, and I can't quote the bill number, but anyway, that Republican-led amendment was defeated because of the swing vote of the Climate Solutions Caucus. So already they have had significant influence in the right direction. And I think that's really positive. The only other comment, we're supposed to be wrapping up about 8 o'clock. The only other comment that I would have is that you folks have heard this story about carbon fee and dividend. If you talk to your friends, the chances are, at least in my experience, they have not, right? So we need to build support and awareness in the community by various means, doing wonderful evenings like this, thanks to Zoe's leadership, letters to the editor, and meeting with groups that might be interested. It could be Sarah, it could be Rotary, it could be student groups. And so my hope is, among this audience tonight, is that some of you will come and talk to me and say, yeah, I'm willing to learn more so I can go to the Sierra Club and give a 20-minute presentation at their next meeting. That's what I think this movement needs more of, probably among other things.
What about district councils?
Yes.
I mean,
Talking to politicians?
well, not politicians, but basically community groups
Yes.
at their district council meetings. Like, you know, every district here
Yeah.
has a district council.
Okay, sure, great idea. Are you on?
No, but I go to the meetings.
Okay. Well, let's talk.
Yeah, so that ties perfectly into our last major point, which is the levers of political will. So this is, you know, this big, big idea and challenge, but there's very tangible ways of approaching it. So there's lobbying. Oh, and this is the thing. So the cool thing about citizens climate lobby is we really try to focus on volunteers and members gaining from their volunteerism. Instead of it just being like you meeting for an hour or something like that, even though that's important, this one, we try to find specific things you want to work on or want to build skill-wise, and then that's what you can do. So because there's kind of like everyone's strengths are needed. So like for instance, we found out that Emily used to be a journalist, and so she was able to write a packet, and that was awesome. And Carol really likes doing the postcards and is really good at eliciting, conjuring up why we care about the climate and stuff like that. And Ron's been a fabulous liaison and has been able to schedule meetings with important people. So it's all been really great. And for me, like I'm not great at public speaking, but this really pushes me to do that. And so it's kind of like it's technically volunteering, but it is really like you gain a lot from it, which is really nice. So some ways in which we do that is lobbying. So that's when you're going to make relationships with federally elected representatives. So if you're interested in politics or you just want to like get to know your politicians better, that's really cool. I've gotten to hug a couple politicians. That was really cool. Because media relations. So if you're interested in like if you have connections in the newspapers or you're interested in journalism, that's always really fun. So we write letters to the editor and op-eds, and we can totally, if you're interested in that, we can totally go over the details of that and how those are written. We have guides and stuff on everything, on how to learn everything. We have like digital guides. And grassroots outreach. So that was kind of, I guess Ron was kind of talking about grassroots and grass tops. So grassroots is that's what Carol does often as well, which is like tabling events, and Emily does it as well, just like tabling events, getting to know people, just at events and stuff like that, and connecting with other citizens and empowering them. But then there's also grass top outreach, so that's like people who have more like public power, so like pastors or business owners, that kind of thing. And so from them we might want endorsements. So that's them signing a document saying, hey, I support the idea of, I support climate action, or I support the concept of a carbon fee and dividend. So that's really powerful because we can show that to our public officials, and then they're like, wow, this has public support, not only at the grassroots level, but also at the level of businesses, which a lot of politicians, they already know that the citizens are interested in it. It's the large businesses that they're afraid of. So the more businesses that we can show are interested in this, which a lot of them are because of the projectability, the better. And then the last is chapter development, and that's kind of what this is right now, which is getting to know people and seeing if anyone's interested in joining us in making a carbon fee and dividend a reality and slowly expanding the Safe Climate Caucus. And so with that all covered, we're finally down to Q&A. So does anyone have any questions, concerns, comments? Yeah.
I have a list, but
Awesome.
start with Tulsi Talk. Why is that? What is that?
That was the talk that Ron fine-tuned as like a elevator pitch if we ever got to talk to Tulsi. So,
Okay.
so it's like we have a long like presentation, and his is like.
So we might mention on that subject that one of the goals of the Hawaii Island chapter is to have Representative Gabbard join the Climate Solutions Caucus. And so we were able to have a face-to-face meeting with her and basically explain what this program is that we support, and it was real interesting. Her response was, I have never heard this explained so clearly ever before. Thank you very much. And so she actually, prior to our meeting with her, she has introduced legislation in the House of Representatives, which is called the Off Fossil Fuels for a Better Future Act. And if you go to government websites, you can find that. It's OFF for short, the OFF Act, Off Fossil Fuels for a Better Future Act. And it also is going to tax fossil fuels, and it's not a carbon fee and dividend. It picks winners and losers and gives to, no doubt, worthy groups. It supports worthy groups within the U.S. So Representative Gabbard is very aware, coming from a Pacific Island as she does. She's very aware.
I was interested in hearing the arguments for the $15 versus the $40 solution. What would be the advantage to the $15? And what?
I'd be kind of guessing on that. Obviously, if you start at 15 and you increase it 10 each year, you're going to get pretty close to 40 at year 3. And maybe it's a more gradual way to get to that level. And I think that proposal that Ted Halstead's group is supporting doesn't have the same automatic escalation. It's going to be on a case-by-case basis. It starts off higher, but this proposal is transparent, it's predictable, and it's simple. So there's a number of things in its favor there. And why they chose 15 and then 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10, I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, how many chapters are there of this CCL in the United States?
I think there's about 800 in the U.S.
800.
And there's many more internationally.
I see. And is there any hierarchy to this, or is there a secretariat that basically, kind of communicates between everything? And
Yes.
There.
So we have lots of online, phone calls. So I really like that about CCL. It's not kind of like we're just taking on the name and then going running with it. We are very organized. So we have an office, a small office, but an office in DC. And so then they have a small amount of staff there, just because there's so much to do, there's so much to organize that they do need staff members, as all nonprofits have. And then under that, there's regional coordinators. And so the group leader for each chapter, so I had to go through a 4-month training to become a group leader. And then after that, I call in and have a meeting, I think it's like every other week. But it's confusing because the state, I'm supposed to have a meeting with the state coordinator, but the Honolulu chapter has been in flux. So I haven't been, but that's going to start, I think, next month. So next month I'm going to be calling and communicating with the rest of the state, which is Honolulu. Maui's working on it. And then we also have a regional coordinator, so that's the whole Pacific. And so I've been calling with Gary Battles, but it looks like Tamara Stoughton will be stepping in for that because Gary recently had some deaths in his life. So, but yeah, so it's very organized. It's very personal because I know these people by their names and stuff. And we have regular communication on almost a weekly basis, which is really nice.
Now, are all chapters, have they all bought in to this carbon tax plan as it was set up in this TED Talk?
Not at, the TED Talk again has some slight differences between ours. But so all the chapters are united under the same concepts. And we also refrain from, like, chapters can make decisions like to go and protest and stuff, but we're discouraged from doing that kind of thing because it can make the group as a whole look unapproachable if it's like on a very specific issue that isn't specifically carbon fee dividend. So we're pretty united and kind of try to keep the same opinions throughout the whole organization. Not opinions, but same goals.
So this nonpartisan
Yes.
is a major value
Yes, very.
that this whole organization
Yes.
buys into.
Very, very nonpartisan. And we try to say nonpartisan instead of bipartisan because, you know, there are like the Green Party and libertarians and stuff as well. So we want to be welcoming to everyone. So, and that's even a policy that like after meetings and stuff like that, if you want to talk political and stuff like that, that's great, but like, you know, like after the meeting. But then we've had conversations about like politics and stuff, but it's always been like, you know, not after official meeting business is done. So, it's values of a law.
Just a
It's great.
question. When you were speaking with Tulsi Gabbard,
Yes.
did you lay out what this nonpartisan value that you had? And I'm just thinking, I mean, the name of that activity that she was talking about would probably not fit into, you know, what this organization's thinking is.
You know, yeah, what I did, you know, it's a learning curve. And some of us try to spend about an hour a day becoming more and more informed gradually, right? So what I did with the Off Fossil Fuels Act, I mean, it's 40-some pages long. And I'm going, oh my God. And it's legalese, right? So I went through it and I summarized it in bullet points, and I got it down to about 4 pages. And then I found a government website where professionals summarized the bills, and they got it down to half a page. So that you know, so A, I understood it. B, I appreciated representatives' work and the heart that went into that legislation. It's not the proposal that I think, that Citizens Climate Lobby thinks is actually more effective. I'm not shy about saying that, you know, and here's the reasons why, you know. So, and I think the meeting, there was 7 of us from the Hawaii chapter met with her and 2 staff people, and we all were following the good advice to be polite and respectful, and yet clear about what we're proposing and what we're asking, and it was great. And what I hope to do is get good enough to do that with somebody who disagrees with the position. And that's a tougher gig if you get adversarial questions, to not get to take it personally or whatever, you know. So anyway, does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does actually. Does the organization as a whole, do they have, let's see, policy dialogue, talking points, so that everybody is saying the same thing?
Absolutely. Yes, they do. So, that's a great question. If you go to citizensclimatolobby.org, if you scroll down through a short 2-minute video, and if you go down to the activities and so on and so forth, down at the bottom, there's a little thing, and I think Zoe's brought it up there. This is down at the bottom of the homepage, and it's called Laser Talks.
Oh, yeah, I already had that open. Okay. Yeah, so laser
And-
talks, they're fun.
Yeah, and it's called Laser Talks. And what it is, it's fabulous. And it's so fabulous that I and Carol printed them out, and I printed them out, and I make notes on it as I think about it and the graphs. And for example, let me just, if I can, pull up one example. Okay. The one example is this.
Which one are you?
It says, now I'm of Irish descent, okay, via New Zealand, but that's irrelevant. However, an Irish scientist by the name of John Tyndall, in 1859, he discovered that if you put different gases in a glass tube and shine light and energy through them, some of the gases get real hot, and other gases, the energy goes straight through and the gas stays cold. The gases that get real hot are carbon dioxide, methane, and water vapor. Voila, 1859. Now, in 1895, which is just a dyslexic switch of the last two figures, a chemist, Svante Arrhenius, Swedish guy, I believe, he said, if we burn this amount of fossil fuels, and if the CO2 in the atmosphere gets this high, the Earth is going to get this warm. And I mean, this guy predicted this in 1895. And yet we've still got climate deniers. Now, Arrhenius was wrong by a factor of 2. He thought it would be twice as hot as it is. What he didn't allow for is that a whole lot of CO2 gets sucked up by the ocean. He didn't know that back then. But, I mean, this is a laser talk. It's about less than a page, the basic science of climate change. And there's a huge amount of wonderful answers to questions that I had never thought of on the webpage.
And so that's really great for, yeah, when you're having conversations with people, you can just, if there's a question, I use this all the time, if there's a question, I don't know the answer yet. And the answers I have slowly build the longer I'm in this organization. And the great thing is, yeah, look, there's all these resources here. They can double check on their facts, which is really great. And then as your, I think your specific question was about carbon fee and dividends. So here's the laser talk for carbon fee and dividend. Oops.
I have a question.
Yes,
So who's funding the office and the website?
that's all, like, just
Donations, right?
But again, that was a concern from someone about, I think it was Rico. Is Rico here? No, Rico didn't make it. Well, we got some emails from Rico that he was concerned that this was all a plot to make a lot of money. I don't think any of us has. That's what I'm saying.
I want to just make sure that Gates is behind it.
Yeah. Well, and that's always really good to check. Yeah. So no, we're asked occasionally to help out. So like right now, apparently their office is too small. But I don't think any of us has donated. It's very, very minimal. Rarely asked for money, and when we're due, it's not.
It doesn't sound like
No.
And then this handout you gave us, there's some dates on the bottom, are those outdated?
Probably.
Okay.
Probably, yeah.
It's
Our
every
next
third,
meeting,
every third,
it's every third Saturday from 10 to 12. And our next meeting, I believe, is the 21st. Yes, it's the 21st.
From 10 to 12?
10 to 12, in this room again. 10 to 12 in the morning, not at night.
Right.
Yeah, and here's the laser talk for the major points to press for carbon fee and dividend. So,
Do you have more people coming on the Saturday from 10 to 12?
we
and
have,
Thursday?
I think we
Or
have
just
about
kind of depend?
7.
Why is today Thursday?
Because this was a special meeting to introduce new people who might be interested.
a new climate advocate welcome night.
And then,
Yeah.
when did you talk to Representative Tulsi? Just
Three
recently?
months ago?
I think it was January.
What was the
Oh,
question?
she went
It was
in
January.
Oh, it was just at the very end of January.
So
Last week in January of this year.
if we like understand this plan well, I think we should advocate by calling her office and said, you know, we just went to this meeting and we would really like you to join the caucus or whatever. We appreciate that you have met with these people and now I sign up to be an advocate. I mean, I think she needs to know that their constituent is.
Totally agree. And I think Carol or Zoe has a little postcard
Yes, we do, which is
Here,
just thinking about.
that we can give you, and it basically, we
But a
send
phone
them
call is always
to
more
Tulsi,
effective.
and you can write your comment.
Right, okay.
And we hand, you know, we don't hand deliver them,
No, this is
And,
so.
Is he?
and at one point, if you're ever interested, we can try to have another meeting with her next time she's here as well, if you're interested in doing that. It's,
No.
that's really nice, she's very intelligent and like totally got everything we were saying like that. Like, and this takes months to learn, and she's just like, so it's a pleasure to have meetings with her if you're interested.
So can I pass some of these out?
Thank you everyone for coming.
So we'll give you back this number then?
Oh, we're gonna have a raffle. Oh, you wanna do that?
It's my personal.
Okay, somebody want to take a number?
Oh, we got, thank you.
Yeah.
We're gonna have a raffle for Elaine and Carol.
I got one right here. You want to see it?
Yeah, read it off, please.
This is number six, right?
Okay, who's six? Who has number six?
Number 6, you're the winner. I don't know how it works. You're probably
Okay.
No.
This is for my garden.
What are these guys?
Blue jay.
I think I made it.
I got you already. Thank you.
You have?
Yeah. I got some.
Okay, thank you.
Did everyone get a sign into that made it up to everyone?
Yeah, here's the sign-in form.
Did everyone do a sign in?
I didn't.
If you need a sign in,
No, it goes a little more.
I'll make it.
Yes, now we're gonna
You know.
go. So they get the best next things to actually.
Anytime there's a new nice road,
this
bring out two things. It's for the logger and the human trafficker.
Bring out whatever.
All the And I have a very small project right now, tiny project. This farmer. I mean, they
Yeah.